Hi everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at a couple of systems in Maya which allow us to link objects together. In a previous video we had a look at the Combine tool which also links objects together into a single selectable object, so make sure you check that video out. But the systems we're looking at today are used more for rigging than modeling, and they allow us to group objects together but still allow those objects to be manipulated independently as well. So let's take a look at how these systems work. You can see here I've got a couple of objects set up. I have a sphere and I have this cylinder which I've bent into this L shape. Now also note that the translates for both objects have been frozen using modify freeze transformations. So all the translates and rotates are zeroed out and the scales are all set to 1. Okay, and that's for both objects. Okay, now to give us a little bit of an idea of how the systems that we're going to look at change the hierarchy or the organization of the scene, what we're going to do is open up the outliner window. Now you can use the preset down here for your viewports, which is the perspective outliner view, and that will give us a split view with the outliner list on the left and the perspective view taking up most of the screen. Or you can open up the outliner as a separate window from window outliner just here, and this will give you a floating window version like this. I prefer the viewport version personally myself, but it's completely up to you how you want to view that panel. It works the same whichever way you do it. Okay, so let's take a quick look in the outliner and have a look at what we've got in our scene. The first 4 items are always there. Those are the perspective top, front and side view cameras for our viewports. Now they're grayed out as you can see here, and basically that's showing that they're hidden, so you don't actually see them floating around here in the scene. You can unhide them, but generally it's best to leave them hidden. Okay. Then we've got the 2 objects in the scene. We've got the cylinder and we've got the sphere, which you can see there. And you can see I'm clicking on them in the outliner, and that selects them over in the viewport. So you can click on them here to select them, or you can click them here. You can hold down shift and do a multiple selection through several objects. Basically you click on the first object and then you click on the second object and it will select everything in between them like that. Or you can just hold down control and click on individual items in the list to select specific ones, and basically obviously leaving some in between unselected. Now you can also hold control and click on selected objects to deselect them as well, so you can make selections here in the outliner. At the bottom here we've got a couple of default sets, light and object, and they generally always appear with your scenes as well. So you can basically ignore those and the cameras. You don't really need to worry about those. Okay, so you'll notice that I've got those 2 objects there. So what we're going to do first is look at parenting. Now parenting allows us to link one object or more than one object to another object. Okay, so you can see here at the moment, if I select for example the cylinder and I move that around, it does exactly what you would expect it to do. It just moves, and obviously the sphere just sits here and doesn't do anything. So what I can do is link the sphere onto the cylinder, so that if I move the cylinder, the sphere will move with it. And that's the parenting system. So to do that, what we do is we select the sphere, and then we select the object we want to link it to, in this case the cylinder, and we come up to Edit Parent. Let's click that. Now you'll notice what happens is the sphere remains selected and the cylinder in this case deselects. Now I can take the selected sphere and I can move it around in exactly the same way as I did before. Just like that, you know, I can rotate it, I can scale it. But if I select the cylinder, you can see that the sphere highlights as well. And if I move this, the cylinder around, you can see that the sphere moves with it. Likewise, if I rotate it or if I scale it, like that. So what we've done is linked this, the sphere onto the cylinder. Now, even after making adjustments to the cylinder like that, and therefore changing the position or rotation or scale of the sphere, I can still select that sphere and actually move that or rotate it or scale it independently again. Okay, now once I've done that, if I go back to here, I can continue to adjust both of them at once. Now you'll notice that basically what's happening is if I reset them back to 0 for my translate and rotate, and back to 1 for my scale, and I come back to the sphere and do the same thing, okay, if I move the sphere, you can see that the numbers change up here for the position. Obviously I've just changed the position. Okay. Now if I reset that back to 0 and I grab the parent object, the cylinder, and I move that around, obviously that's going to change the numbers as well. But even though the sphere has moved with the cylinder, if we take a look at the sphere, you can see that that's still set to 0, even though the sphere is in a different position. And that's because what's happening is it's actually taking its position information from the cylinder rather than its own position information. So the software actually thinks that this object is still in its original position because these are all still set to 0. But what's happening is the cylinder is kind of controlling it and moving it as well. So the positional information is now coming from the cylinder instead of directly from the sphere. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, this sphere thinks that the cylinder is actually kind of like the center of the grid. This object takes all its positions from the center of the grid, and this object takes all of its positions from the cylinder. And that's the hierarchy that we've got. So this is what's called the child object, and this is called the parent object. So the parent object controls the child object. And if we have a look in the outliner, we can actually see that system setup, or that hierarchy. You can see here that the polygon cylinder is still visible, but the sphere object from the list has disappeared. If we fold down or expand open this polygon cylinder node, we can see the sphere is actually positioned underneath it. And you can see we've got this little hierarchy tree connection here. So this is the parent object, and the child object is sort of connected in underneath that. So that's basically a parented network or a parented hierarchy. Now you can have more than one object parented onto another object, but basically you can only ever have one parent object. You know, multiple children or child objects, but one parent object. Okay. So let's take a quick look. I'm just going to reset that, and in order to disconnect a parented hierarchy, we select the child object or child objects. We go back up to edit and down to unparent, which is Shift P. And that disconnects them. You can see now they're just appearing in the list as normal, like that. So let's say I take the cylinder object and I move it over here, like this. And let's say that I want this object to be parented onto here again, but I want this object over here. Because this object has been moved, and you can see up here we've got these numbers, what we can do is just select this sphere and then select the cylinder, and we can parent them again. So we'll just go edit, parent. But if we go into options, you can see we've got this preserve position option just here. Now normally by default it would be switched on. Okay, mine, I'm just going to save that. Mine keeps switching off by default, but basically you can have it usually I think is switched on by default. So preserve position, okay, what this does is if the parent object is off, sort of in a certain position dictated by these numbers, and this is switched on, if I hit apply, you can see that the sphere stays exactly where it is. And it's definitely parented. You can see that there, they're both highlighting when I select that parent object, and they both move together like this. But basically the child object stayed exactly where it is. So I'll just undo that that parent. So we're back to sort of unparented now, which you can see here. Now if I turn this off, preserve position, and I apply that, you can see that the sphere will jump to the position of the cylinder. Okay, so before I said that when you parent an object to another object, the child object treats the parent object as sort of the center of its universe, like its default position. So when you turn this off and you parent, basically the child object will jump to the position of the parent object. Now I found that there is one exception to that, and that, let me just undo that parent option, there we go. So the one exception that I found, or the exception I found to that, is if the parent object is in its default location and all its translates and rotates and scales are kind of default like this. If we move this object over here, okay, and then parent it, so this is in its default location, this is sort of off random like this. If I parent that and hit apply, even with this switched off, nothing happens. Now even though there are similar systems in other software that does this, parenting is a reasonably common 3D system, it doesn't always work like this in other software packages. Most of them will have this option, and basically that dictates whether or not the object will jump from one to the other. Maya seems to work slightly differently. So even when this is switched off, if this is in its default location without any numbers here, this will stay exactly where it is, even if this is off, basically. So you just need to be careful of that. So that's parenting. Basically, you're connecting one object onto another object. Okay, so just remember, parenting, the shortcut is P, and unparenting, the shortcut is Shift P, just there. And you can go into the options and you can preserve position if you need to. Okay, so let's just close that, and I'll unparent that with Shift P and reset the numbers. Okay, so let's have a look at another option for linking object, and that's the group option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my sphere, and I'm going to select my cylinder, and I'm going to come up to Edit and back down near the bottom. So you can see here, obviously parent, unparent. Above that, we've got group and ungroup. So I'm going to just select group, and we'll see what happens. Now you can see here what happens is when you group, both objects turn green. And over here in the outliner, we have a new object or a new node, and that's a group node. In this case, it's group 1, and it has this little icon here, a little red arrow with a like a trapezoid type shape. If we fold this down, you can see that both the cylinder and the sphere this time are parented underneath this new group node. So this is a parenting hierarchy, exactly the same as the parenting function, except instead of it being one object to another object, what happens is all the objects that are selected get added to a new node that appears in the scene. Now this node is purely just a position in space, in 3D space. It doesn't have a physical representation over here in our 3D viewports. Now that can be an issue when you have a complicated scene and you might have like dozens of different entries in here. It can be a pain scrolling through here and trying to find where your particular group node is. So you can actually switch on a little visual handle for your group nodes so you can actually click on them in the scene. So to do that, what we do is we select the group and we come up to Display, Transform Display, Selection Handles, just here. And we click that. And what happens is in the middle of the grid, now this would always happen by default in the middle of the grid. And the reason for that is that when you create a group, it always creates the pivot point for the group in the middle of the grid. So you can see over here, all of these are zeros and ones. Okay. Now just here, there's a little cross with a kind of a circle bit in the middle of it, or a little square bit. Okay, just here. Now that's the handle for the group, and what we can do is reposition it so that it's easier to select. Quite often these might appear in the middle of an object or right on the side of an object like this, and they can be difficult to actually click. So what we can do is move that. To do that, we come up to component mode, and this time I'm using this button at the top. So I click on that, and then what you want to do is highlight select handle components just here. Normally it's switched off, and all you do is click it. It's this little plus symbol, and you'll see that the handle over here goes pink, and you can just click it and it'll turn yellow to show that it's selected, and then just grab the move tool and just move it into a position where you can see it like that. Then all you need to do is just turn this back to object mode. Just click this button here, and you can see there that it's now visible. When you deselect everything, you'll see it turns sort of this black color. So I can select my group now by clicking that, or I can just select the individual pieces of the model just by clicking on those. Okay, so basically for all intents and purposes, grouping is exactly the same as parenting, except that grouping gives you an extra node that you can use to move your objects around with. So I can move the group around like that, or I can grab just the stick and move that around, or just the sphere and move that around like that. So this little setup that I've got here, I've kind of based this on sort of a real world object, okay, to give you a bit of an idea of how this system would work, or what you could use it for instance. Basically what you could do is build something like this. This is an orrery, which is sort of an old school representation of the solar system. Now this one here is a fake one. It's like a little steampunk ornament that someone's built. And this was just a random picture I grabbed off the internet just to give you a bit of a reference. But you can see here, like this little planet here. It's just a sphere with a stick, little bent stick that pops in. And on a working one, basically this is all clockwork, and you wind it up, and it basically all of these kind of orbit around the sun at different speeds. So that's sort of the setup that I've got here. So to give you an idea of the way that this would work as far as if you were animating this, I've got what I would do, for instance, is I would animate this object, the little planet. I would just make that spin. So I'm just going to very quickly keyframe this. So let's say I maybe make that go 180. Just going to turn auto key on. So basically what that's going to do is just spin like that on the spot. But you can see there that it's not actually kind of traveling around. It's just going to spin on the spot. So then what I can do is select the group like this, and I can keyframe that. So what I can do maybe is get that to go 360 degrees or 359, like that. So now what happens is that will spin, and the little planet will spin on top. So I get the orbiting around the sun by animating the group, and I get the actual day-night rotation of the planet by just independently keyframing this object here. And if you want, you can put a little texture on it, like a little planet Earth texture, like that. And you could make a model of the solar system, little clockwork model of the solar system, just using that grouping setup. And all you do is set the actual grouping up in the same way for each planet. Now what you could do is actually build one group like this, and then duplicate it. So if I go edit, duplicate, it'll give me another group with the exact same copied objects in, and I can scale them. So I can go scale up, and then I could move this down a little bit like that. Now you'll see that the group, the duplicated group, doesn't have any animation on it. Okay. But then all you do is go in and animate that as well. So yeah, that's like a little real world application. That's, just one thing you can use grouping for. So with that said, I'm going to leave this video here, and I'll see you next time.